Welcome, everyone, to the Clocking Out podcast, a show about people who share their own personal journey that include making bold choices to clock out of situations, to follow their dreams of career fulfillment, and to live their most authentic lives. I'm your host, Raymond Lee, and this podcast could not be possible without the support of Career Minds. More about Career Minds after the show. Today, I am incredibly excited to bring to you my dear friend, Anna Papalia, who over the last few years has built an incredible following on social media with over 2 million followers across TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. She recently authored the book Interviewology, the new science of interviewing. Anna has such an amazing story. I'm incredibly excited to share with everyone here her story. And I'm going to just call Anna the queen of interviewing. She doesn't know that yet, but she has certainly deserved the title. Anna has consulted with Fortune 100 companies. She's taught at Temple University's Fox School of Business and has coached over 10,000 clients and individuals to interview better. So without further ado, please enjoy my friend, Anna Papalia. Anna Papalia, welcome to the show.
Raymond, it's always nice to be with you.
Oh my gosh, can I just tell you how grateful I am that you're carving out time? I mean, you have this book launch and you're super busy, you're all over social media, and the fact that you're spending your precious time with me this morning means so much. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, it's truly my pleasure. Really, anything for you.
So we are gonna talk about interviewology, which I'm excited for our listeners to learn more about. But I first want to say, is it appropriate for me to call you the queen of interviewing?
That might be the first time. I kind of like that. Maybe I'm getting crowned here. Is this my coronation?
I love
here
it.
Today?
Yes, it is. And, when I've followed you, over the last, let's say 5 years and the launch of your company, you have really been a trendsetter when it comes to interviewing. And so, I think this coronation is well-deserved. So we're going to call you the queen of interviewing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'll take it.
Yeah. So let's rewind and let's go to the beginning. I want to know, you and I become really good friends over the years, but share, who's Anna Papalia? Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Let's start there.
Sure. I was born in Maine, actually. My father came right off the boat, literally. It was actually a cruise ship from Italy.
Wow.
He worked on a cruise ship, and my mother sold tickets to that cruise ship. That's how they met. And there weren't any jobs on the boat. But my dad was a very charming maitre d' and played poker with the captain and said, if I win this hand, you have to give my girlfriend a job on the boat. That was my mother.
Wow.
And I came around very quickly thereafter. And they got married on the cruise ship. And there's all these, there was a newspaper article about it. Pretty funny. It was a very small town in Maine. It was a big deal. So my dad came here right from Italy. He was the only person that came to America. And my mom's family is 5, 6, or 7 generations from Maine. I think we, trace that side of my family ancestry to Daniel Boone. So I'm very American on one side and very Italian on the other. I spent almost all of my summers going to Italy to visit my Italian side. And then obviously the rest of the time, in Maine and New England. And my parents didn't stay married. They actually divorced when I was very young. And my mom remarried my stepfather, who was fine for the first few years, and then became very controlling and very abusive. And my mom and my stepfather had 3 other children, which even made me more the redheaded stepchild. It was just a division in the family. And I ended up moving out at 15, which is sort of well documented. I write about the story in my book. And obviously that was a crystallizing moment for who I am and how I see the world.
Wow. First of all, thanks for sharing that. I wonder, you mentioned you have some siblings that came from your mom and your stepdad. Are you close to them today, or?
No, we were, growing up, but that division of, my stepfather was their father. So there was a little bit of like, that division. I obviously didn't like him very much. So we are not close and we don't speak, unfortunately.
How much of the Italian culture have you brought back in terms of the work that you do today? Do you speak Italian, or have you learned the language?
So I went to Penn for psychology. And at Penn, you have to take 4 classes or test out of a foreign language. So I took Italian, and I thought it was going to be like my easiest classes, right? Because like I grew up speaking this, and it was actually turned out to be my hardest classes ever because I knew it from speaking it. I didn't know how to write Italian. So I would need a big refresher. Like I keep saying, one of these summers, I'm going to go to Rome for a couple months and just live there. But it's a big part of who I am, just I think as a person. I think I identify very much with that culture, but also being an American too. I was very close to my mom's parents.
So you mentioned you went to Penn, and my sense is that interviewing wasn't, there's obviously not a degree in that. What was your desire? Why Penn, and what was your major?
So when I was in 9th grade, I took my first psychology course, and it was like love at first sight. I was like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. And then from there, it took a couple different iterations. I thought, would it be criminal science? I was like, I could be a detective. I could be a lawyer. I had this thirst and interest for figuring people out. And there were a lot of lawyers in my family. So I thought maybe I would do that. But it was always psychology, some version of that. And I always excelled in those courses. And then I was like, well, I do really want to help people. So maybe it's the therapeutic route. And I went to Penn, and I got my first internship in a behavioral health clinic. And I was very excited about it. I thought, this is it. I'll be a therapist. Maybe I'll become a psychiatrist, something, I definitely like the first few days of that internship, I was like, this is it. And then this is one of the reasons I tell people to have internships, because very quickly into that internship, I was like, oh my God, this is not for me at all. I hate all of this. Like, I love talking to people. I love working with people. I love helping people, but I don't like this atmosphere. I don't like this environment. This is not for me. And there's nothing I'm not saying negative anything about that. It's just, when something's not for you. And I immediately was like, maybe I could try to do this in corporate. So I was like, well, my next internship was a corporate HR position, and that was a much better fit for me. And I thought, how can I help people in the corporate world? HR seemed like a natural fit. And my first internship was a generalist position. I was terrible at it, like so bad at it. I don't have a high attention to detail. I'm a people person. I want to talk to people. I want to build relationships. I want to help people. And an HR generalist, as you know, is like, it's a lot of like data entry and forms. And a form is like my kryptonite. I'm a smart person, but I lose all of my senses when I have to fill out an Excel form. I should have been fired. I was making mistakes all the time. And a recruiter came over to me and handed me a stack of resumes and was like, can you help me? She was totally overwhelmed. Can you call a few of these, like do some phone screens? And I was like, they're going to pay me to do that? Oh, yes, please. And it was unbelievable. I was just a natural. I loved it so much. So I used my psychology background, and it kind of felt like being a detective a little bit. Like, here's what the hiring manager needs. And here, the company internally, and you're making a match. It was sort of like being a matchmaker, being a detective, being a therapist. And it pushed on all the things that I loved. And I was like, oh, this is for me. This is for me. And I got like 3 promotions in like months. It was like boom, boom, boom. I mean, I just couldn't get enough of it. And that's often sort of a theme in my, even with social media now as I talk about this, but like once I find something I love, I can't stop. I'm obsessive. I'm passionate. I do it until I perfect it, until I, hit 1 million followers, or until I get promoted to director of talent, whatever. So that's how I found recruiting. And it honestly was a sort of love at first sight, and just this Venn diagram of all the things that I loved. It was just amazing.
So your tenacity obviously comes through, and the word influencer, I feel like is kind of ringing through even to today. I want to go back though, if you don't mind, just for a moment. I read and I watched, your work online, and you described your interview with the admissions person at Penn, and how your, sort of some bold choices that you made in life kind of led you to this interview. And it was almost a defining moment for you in terms of your academic career, as well as, how your life and your career has played out. I wonder if you'd share with us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I tell the story in my book, and I tell the story in my DisruptHR talk as well. I was, I moved out at a young age, and I knew that education and college would be the only way for me to just get out of this small town in Maine. And I did not want to live in a small town. I'm a city girl. I wanted to get out of there. So, long story short, I ended up applying to the University of Pennsylvania, an Ivy League school, in which I believed I absolutely did not belong. I did not have the grades. I was not, I just no way I belonged there. Should have never. It was not even in the remote sense that it was such a long shot in my mind. And they invited me in for an interview during the admissions process. And I remember them asking and digging into, obviously why I didn't play extracurricular supports, and my SATs and my grades weren't as great as everyone else's. So I had to be honest and tell them the story of, hey, I moved out at 15. And while some of my peers were playing tennis and soccer and travel softball, I was literally working and paying for an apartment. And I worked all the time, and I bought a car by saving $800. I lived in an apartment with 3 roommates originally, and I had an air mattress and 2 milk crates that I kept all my belongings in. And I did it all because I knew how important it was to stay in school and get myself out of there. And I wasn't telling the story because I was trying to pull on their heartstrings. I was literally telling the story to explain who I was and why, my SAT scores weren't that great. And I'll never forget it. I say this all the time. The admissions officer looked at me and he said, well, you have a tough decision to make. You can wait for the letter, or I can admit you on the spot. It still to this day chokes me up a little bit when I talk about it. And it was this real moment of choosing authenticity and being myself and standing in my truth, and just, owning all of the shameful parts of me that had happened, and realizing that those actually gave me so many incredible blessings, so many incredible strengths. And it was a defining moment, but I'll be honest with you, Raymond, it was probably one of the last times I ever told that story. That was 2001. And I didn't tell that story again until I told it in my Disrupt talk in 2019, because I just was striving so hard to not be that girl who moved out and to not be identified. I worked so hard to be successful in my career that I wanted to push so far away from that identity. And it wasn't until I came full circle and started telling my story that I realized, in an interview, you have to tell your story as I did. And if I'm encouraging people to stand in their truth, I need to do it as well. And by doing that, I encourage other people to own all the parts of their story. And for me, it was a very therapeutic and cathartic moment, and a major turning point in my career professionally, but also personally, that I was no longer defined by it. And I was transmuting the pain, and it became something that was a positive and not something to be ashamed of. And now people think it's really amazing. But there was a long period in my life where I was ashamed of it and sad, and it was hard, and it was very traumatic. Makes for a great story now, but like for a long time, it was awful.
Thank you for being so vulnerable with your share. I think that oftentimes people who have traumatic experiences when they're young, and that's so impactful to their lives, they try to, kind of like forget about it and don't want to shine a light on it. They don't want to connect to that identity and try to live a life of somebody that's different than the person that they were when they were a kid. And I really appreciate the fact that, I can relate to similar experiences of trauma that I had as a child where I didn't want to remember those things. And so what would you say to listeners who are, trying to figure out their identity, and how should they, like really embrace who they are as a person? And how does that help bring clarity in your future as it relates to your career and being fulfilled in the work that you do?
Well, I think specifically when it comes to work, and especially when it comes to interviewing for jobs, I say this all the time on social. An interview is a set of questions about you, and the more you know yourself, the better you'll do. So I think self awareness is the first step to so much in our careers, in being authentic, where confidence comes from, really embracing all the parts of your story. I think it's incredibly important to know who you are and to embrace who you've been.
Hmm. Okay, so let's fast forward now. You're working in the corporate world and you have your degree, you're out there interviewing, you're recruiting. At what point did you decide that this corporate work is not for me and you were going to dip your toe into entrepreneurship?
Well, it was interesting because I was never really like an anti-corporate person, clearly. I mean, people accuse me of that all the time on social, that I'm so corporate. So it was less, I hate corporate. It wasn't that for me. I was in a very fortunate position. I was the director of talent for George Norcross's insurance brokerage, Connor Strong and Buckaloo. I had an incredible boss, and I worked with incredible executives. Most of them are still there to this day. I loved every single person I worked with, and I loved my job. And I was in a very fortunate position that I got to a point in my career where I was like, I want more. And I'm not leaving this place because I hate it or because it's toxic or because my boss isn't giving me challenges. No, none of that. I had everything, and I could still be working there to this day, just like all of them, and probably happily. But unfortunately, I had this realization. I was in interviews very often, and I was thinking, this is such a simple thing if you're just taught this, if you just knew this. And I wanted to reach across the table and just tell someone, if you just said this, you'd make a better impression. If you just did this, you'd get more money in the negotiation. And that feeling wouldn't go away. It got worse over like a year and a half's time. And simultaneously, I had gone through a pretty long and painful divorce, and I purchased a big investment property. And for the first time in my adult life, I had some money saved, and I was in a great place in my career. And I felt this freedom of sort of, I think, expression, and also to look in the world and be like, there's something missing. How can I be the solution? And I just kept coming back to teaching people how to interview because that's what I wanted to do in my day to day. And I saw a need for it, not just with job seekers, with hiring managers too. Like my hiring managers hadn't been trained. None of us had been. It was just like the wild, wild west. I'm like, there has to be a better way. And I couldn't ignore it. It just kept coming up for me. It was nagging at me 24/7. That's what happens in my life when I need to make a change, like this intuition that just gnaws at me. And I had a meeting with the president, and I said, "Listen, I have this dream. I need to do this, and if I don't do it now, I'll regret it forever." At the time, I didn't have children yet. I'm still fairly young. I'm young enough. I have some money saved and I don't have children. Now's the time to do it. I'll regret it forever. And Mike Tagwad, the president, wonderful guy, still there, put his glasses on the top of his head, leaned back in his chair, and he said, well, you got moxie. And that literally was like all I had. I didn't have a business plan. I didn't have anything else. I just had this intuition. I just had this. This is like not the way they tell you to start businesses in business school at all. But I followed my intuition. I followed my joy. I followed my bliss. And it wasn't until about a month later after I had left that I had that holy shit moment where I was like, oh my God, I'm unemployed. What did I just do to my life? And now I have to like start a business and like get an LLC, you go through that process. And then very quickly after, the dean of the risk management department at Temple University, Dr. Drennan, who I had hired all of my interns from, called me and they said, we're redesigning our interview prep program and class. Come in for a meeting. I did. And he was like, you know what the students are doing right and wrong. You hired all of them. Can you come in and teach them how to interview? How fabulous was that, right? Like I started this business with this intention and it was like, oh my gosh, yes, of course, absolutely. But in the back of my mind, I was like, I'm not really a teacher. I'm a teacher, like I envisioned myself more of a coach for sure. And I thought that's the direction I was going to go in. But I mean, teaching is coaching. It's just a little bit more structured. And that's why I do what I do. I mean, I truly believe an interview can change your life the way it changed mine. And the tools I give people, this is not rocket science. I'm not some like brainiac over here. These are just like some basic things that I learned from being in the corporate world and having been a recruiter for such a long time and knowing great hiring managers and bad hiring managers, what they, the pros and cons of what they need and want. And I'm just telling people I'm coaching them like any good coach, Maybe your stance is a little off. Maybe say it this way. Maybe do it that way. I never tell people to pretend to be something that they're not. That I think is really important. And again, it's going back to my own journey of owning my story, being authentic. That's where confidence comes from.
I love that. And I think about, so clocking out, you've obviously clocked out of several situations throughout your life. And I want to just for a moment backtrack to this intuition where it seems like there were these defining moments throughout your life and your career where you had this intuition, where this voice, this nagging voice that was saying, Anna, this is the direction we're going to go. And we all have that voice, and you made a choice. And I wondered if there was this other side, the story of some voice saying, don't do it, you can't do it. And how do you quiet that voice? Because I think that many listeners here, they have that intuition, that gut feeling, but for some reason, they don't make the choice that you've made. And I wonder, how do you quiet that voice and really dig deep and go forward? And you've had that a couple of times that occurred. And I wonder if you can share your thoughts about that.
Mm-hmm. Many times in my life. I honestly think it's one of my biggest strengths and something I attribute all of my success to is my incredibly strong intuition. Sometimes it comes at very inconvenient times and I'm like, oh no, I have done a lot of work to know the difference between my intuitive voice and the voice of society. And I think those are the two voices you're talking about. I think a lot of those kernels and that skill comes from having grown up in an abusive situation where I had to learn and I just knew innately, intuitively right from wrong. And I had to stand up for myself. And I truly believe that's where that intuition feeling comes from and how I've gotten so practiced at knowing what it sounds like. For me, my intuition sounds like a very calm, deep knowing. It's just a knowing. I just know it. And I can't ignore it. It's like my eyes are green. That's a fact. It's a knowable thing. And then if someone says to me, no, your eyes are blue, that's kind of for me what society says. It's easy for me to ignore it because I know it's not true. That's how I define my intuition. And that's also how I know the difference. And of course, there are times, especially with launching a book and being so public on social media, where, a lot of those voices could be in your head. But I think it's actually helped me quite a bit because I didn't grow up with social media. I'm fairly secure. So like, I don't let a lot of that noise bother me. It truly doesn't, because I kind of have this deep well of knowing what I need and want. And sometimes those things are crazy. Like, leave your comfortable, stable corporate job, go start a business. You have no business experience. You have no business plan. It's nuts. Like, some of these intuition moments are totally nuts, but I can't not do it. My brain, my body will not let me do it. I've tried, for years, I've tried to stay in bad relationships or bad jobs, and I cannot do it. So I've learned it's easier and faster to just listen to that intuitive voice. That's how I do it. I know other people, I kind of wish that I had like an ability to ignore it more. I can't.
No, we're not doing that. I love how you brought that to life with the eye color and how society defines what you should do and how you're able to ignore that. That was beautiful.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, I think that's, we get a lot of messages from society, and as women, we certainly get a lot of messages. You have to be perfect, but not too perfect. It's the amazing America Ferrara monologue in the Barbie movie. If you saw that, there's a lot of complexity in being a public figure as a woman as well. And I think that the only way to survive it, and not just being in the public sphere, but also just being a person or having a career, is like, I say it all the time, knowing who you are, having self-awareness is the anchor. It's the thing that keeps you sane, like at the end of the day, I know who I am. So it matters to me a little bit, like what people say about me online, but not that much.
So Anna, let's move into Interviewology. You're running a successful company. You've created this shift profile that
Interviewology profile. That's how long we've known each other. You knew it when it was shift profile, which I love.
Yeah, it was the inception. It was the shift profile. Now it's the Interviewology profile. So when did you decide you wanted to write a book? And tell us how that journey started.
Well, as you know, as an author, it's not an easy thing to take on. And I was a very avid reader as a child and always knew I was going to write a book. Another intuitive moment for me. I just knew that was going to be something that I would do, that I wanted to do. And I was working at Temple teaching juniors and seniors. I was working 6 days a week. It was like getting a PhD in interviewing. And I started to have these moments where I would ask myself, maybe some of my students aren't getting this material. And I hope all good teachers get to this point where they're like asking themselves, like, is it me? Am I not teaching it correctly? And I asked myself a really deep question one day. I was like, perhaps we don't all interview the same way. And I was like, bing. Oh, like, wait, what? Like, I'd never thought about it in that way. And I explored that line of thinking. And I thought, well, what if we don't? And if there are interview styles, what if I could figure that out? And what if I could codify it and create a language and help people? Bing, 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 bing. It was like light bulb moment. So I collected all this research, and I knew in it would be a book. But I collected a ton of research, wrote the interview style assessment. I probably worked with 200 students intimately after they got their results to interview them about it. And then I mock interviewed them, and then a team of third-party interviewers mock interview them to see if their assessment results were correct. And I really took it very seriously, the responsibility of, if you tell someone you're this way, it's like a personality assessment. I wanted to make sure that it was true, because my students, took this stuff as gospel. So I didn't want it to be incorrect. And I wanted it to be based in science, because we don't have any tools that are scientific when it comes to interviewing. And in that process, I knew that there was a book, but it was a long process of research and discovery. And then things were taking off. That was right around the time we first met when we did our SHRM speaking event together. You moderated the panel that I spoke on. Obviously, I was speaking about interviewing. And things were taking off. I had, the assessment as a tool for hiring managers and job seekers. I had just launched my website in 2019, and then COVID happened. And I was going stir crazy. I'm type A, and I was like, what am I going to do? I don't have as much work. And I thought, well, now's the best time that I should write a book. I'll do it now. When else am I going to get this time in my life? What an amazing opportunity. And I'm a very optimistic person. So I was like, in order for me to survive COVID with a 2 and 5-year-old, I literally wrote my book during their nap times during COVID lockdown. That's how the book happened.
So you spent all of your time during nap time, you're writing the manuscript for Interviewology while the kids are sleeping. I love that. So you're sitting now on a manuscript, which I think oftentimes, that's obviously the toughest part, right? Where you're writing all of this knowledge that you're putting into the book. So what do you do from there in terms of, are you self-publishing it? How are you actually publishing the book?
Yeah. So people always ask me, what was the hardest part about writing a book? And I'm like, writing the book for me was the easy part. It was also a nonfiction book and based on a lot of research. So that felt easier to me. I had the book written and then I was like, well, what do I do with this? And then I had to learn the process of writing a book proposal because most nonfiction books are bought on a book proposal, which is basically like a business plan for a book. It's like 80 pages with sample chapters. And it's a business plan for the book, your demographics. I'm terrible at doing all of that stuff. So I hired someone to write my book proposal. So I had this book proposal and they're like, okay, now you have to query literary agents. You need an agent because I was not going to self-publish. I wanted to have a traditional publisher. And I queried 40 agents and they all ignored me except for one woman. And she said, I'll give you 5 minutes. So I hopped on a call with her and she said, you're brilliant. Your book is brilliant. The idea is brilliant, but you're not going to get the book deal that you want unless you have like 250, 300,000 followers. And I was like, what? Who has time for that? This is the game I have to play. This is ridiculous. I have 2 small kids. I just created this whole thing. I built a business. Are you kidding me? And that's usually how people react to good advice, right? You're like,
right.
Fuck this. I'm not doing this, right? You resist it. You're like, no way. I just wrote a fucking book and now I have to do this? Sorry for the F-bombs, but it's like, that's how it feels, right? It's like another thing. And I resisted it. Probably for a year, maybe. I just was like, I don't want to make video content. And I don't want to do this and whatever. It was all the excuses.
Well, the idea of getting 250,000 followers.
It was like climbing Mount Everest.
On anything. Like,
oh my God.
Get 10 followers that give 2 craps about the work that you're doing. Really.
I'm not a social media person. I have a Facebook page to stay connected with people that I went to, like old friends, right? That I went to college and high school with. I am not a big social media person.
Right.
So the idea exactly of getting 250,000 followers was like, that could take me 5 years, right?
So how'd you do it?
I was like, oh my God, there's no way. So, okay, a couple things happened, so I started thinking about it a lot and I was like, listen, I have this huge responsibility to this book and this product and I want to get it out there and I need a great publisher to do that. And if they're telling me this is what I have to do, in the end, I'm a very good student and I'm super type A and I'm goal oriented. So I was like, okay, uncle, okay, I will try it. And the other thing that happened as I'm starting to like get more comfortable with the idea is I lost my cousin in November, a very tragic and sudden death. He was only 41. We were very close when we were younger. And losing somebody like that was so crystallizing and a cathartic moment in this way that I was like, it could all be over tomorrow. What am I doing? I'm dragging my feet. This is a privilege. This is a pleasure. I should jump into this. So January of 2022, I made it a resolution because I'm a goal-oriented gal. And I said, I'm doing it. And on my walk to work one morning, I popped open the camera app on my phone and I just did a 1-minute video. And it was awful. It was horrible. I wasn't wearing makeup. I mean, it was all bad, but I didn't care. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I watched a few videos on like how to make TikToks. And I was like, I'm just going to make a couple every day and just get comfortable with it. And they were all terrible. And watching them now is like super cringe, but that's how you learn.
Mhm.
And that is one thing about me. Like I just jumped in with both feet. Like if I'm going to do it, I'm just going to do it, and I don't have much shame. So,
So when did you actually start seeing things? You're like, you did that first video. It's
nothing
cringy.
happened.
Like
Nothing
how
happened.
many of those
Nothing happened.
nothing, like how many of that actually occurs? Because people are probably listening to this and relating to, it may not be trying to get followers on social media, but
anything. Yeah.
it could be anything. It could be starting a company and they're making phone calls and no one's answering or no one's calling them back, or even searching for a job and I'm putting my resume out there and nothing. Like how many of those have to occur before you're like, wow, I'm actually getting their attention?
So, to the rejection thing, right? For years in my business, I had been rejected so much by corporate. I was created this product, this great idea, this innovative way to teach hiring managers how to interview, this framework based in science. I thought it was brilliant. People would tell me it was brilliant. I would go on all these corporate sales meetings and they'd be like, we love it. It's brilliant, but no, we're not ready. We don't have the budget, whatever. And I had been rejected so many times, but I had this responsibility to this product that I just kept going, and failure wasn't an option. But I got to the point, I remember there were a few rejections from some major companies where we had been through a long sales cycle and we had gotten just to the finish line and they were like, no, never mind. And those big corporations, they don't care. But to you, it's like, oh,
it's huge.
And that was huge. And that was a big part of the shift also was I'm going to go directly to the consumers. I want to get the book. And that helped me shift my focus. So I had already the muscle for rejection. I had the muscle for, I'm just going to do it, and how embarrassing can it be to have a TikTok that only gets 100 views? Because for the first couple of weeks, that's how bad it is. And like you slowly get a few followers here and there, and you get some really horrible comments and you have to develop some thick skin. And it was just this very, very slow tick for the first couple weeks. But I did start to notice that like my website traffic was getting better. And I started to notice like these very small things. But I was just so I just need followers to get a book deal. I just need followers to get a book deal. And I'll never forget it. So I started this very end of January, being very consistent every day, posting a TikTok, maybe a couple of TikToks. And I was trying everything. I was doing lip syncing. In the beginning, you have to try everything. And I think it was March. So about 6 weeks in, I posted a video, questions to ask at the end of an interview, 1-minute video. I'm just sitting in my office. It was a very practiced thing. I used to tell my students quite a lot. Here's what you need to know. If you're talking to HR people, ask these types of questions. If you're talking to hiring managers, ask these types of questions. 1 minute. I posted it on a Friday night, went away for the weekend, came home on Sunday, and I thought, I should check that video. And I opened my Facebook for the first time over the weekend because, again, I'm not a social media person, believe it or not. And it was like, brrr, and I was like, oh, what's that? It was my first experience with a viral video, and it had over like 1 million views. And I was like, ugh. I'd been suffering in the 100 views, and I was like, I'd never seen the M before. I was like, there's an M. What? And I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then that week forever changed really everything. That video went from getting 1 million views to getting 29 million views. The head of Boeing's talent shared it on LinkedIn. Jay Leno's casting agent reached out to me. I had only been doing this for 6 weeks. Now, mind you, I had been teaching interviews for 10 years and I knew what I was talking about, but I was not prepared for the level of exposure that happens immediately with a viral video. And I went from 0, maybe I had a couple hundred followers on Facebook. That was going viral on Facebook, to 233,000 followers.
Wow.
So I kind of accomplished the thing that they told me I needed to do. And I was like, well, let me keep going and get some more followers on TikTok and Instagram and that sort of thing. So that was March. I waited until July. I re-queried all of the agents that I had reached out to before. Like I said before, 39 of them ignored me, except for the one nice lady who gave me that advice. And then I went back and sent them an amended book proposal with now all my followers. And I got 8 offers of representation.
Wow. That's
So
amazing.
there's something to be said about following directions.
Well, and it also sounds like it's sort of like you cracked the code. Like you literally were trying different things, and the formula. And I follow you on TikTok, I follow you on social media, and I see how you show up in terms of engaging your audience around the best practices of interviewing. And you tried several things, and it's one thing connected, and it literally it was a snowball effect, and kudos for that.
Well, I can't take all the credit. I think it's a couple things happening, especially in my favor, is first of all, we don't teach people how to interview, which is a criminal. Getting a job or a promotion depends on how you perform in this artificial event, and we don't give these skills. There's a historical context why, because of the society we live in. I could spend hours talking to you about that. So people are desperate for this content. People need help. I am giving help in short 90-second actionable ways that's very quick, very user-friendly, and I try to give generalized tips that work with almost every industry. I do that by design because I want to help as many people as possible. I am not doing this for the views. I'm not doing it for followers. Is it fun? Is it nice? Sure. Did it get me a book deal? Yes. But I do this because I've been doing this, as you know, since I started this business in 2011, when I was that girl leaving, quitting my very corporate job saying, I have this dream. I want to teach people how to interview. I truly do this because I want to help people. In the first thing I realized in the magic and the power of social media was I was getting comments from people that said, this always makes me cry. This guy said something. I taught people how to negotiate in like a 2-minute video, very simple stuff. These are the basics of negotiation. And he said, you just put more food on people's dinner tables. And that to me is like, this is a superpower skill that I have that I can help change people's lives. And I thought that I was going to become a therapist. I thought that I was going to become a lawyer or a detective. And I use all of these skills in the service of good to help people change their lives the way I did. And I don't want anyone ever stuck in a toxic job or stuck in a bad relationship because their partner or spouse has the purse strings. I want every woman and man to have get your hand off my knee money. I want everyone to feel financially empowered, and an interview is economic mobility. It's everything. You can change your life in a job interview. I truly believe this. I'm so passionate about it. And I think that comes through. So that combination of my passion and the true need of people really needing these tips, I think that's what has made my platform successful. I can attribute it to, me wearing, jazzy shirts and, sure, I give some good advice, but I think it's those two things coming together.
That's so inspiring. I love that. Well, so you had 8 offers, and you go with one of them. Like, what was the defining moment there where you ended up signing with the?
Well, it was an interview. So so I had 8 offers from agents. You interview all the agents. I picked the best one that I felt most connected to. And then from there, they amend your book proposal a little bit, and then they send it out to publishers, and there's a process with that. And then you get offers from publishers, and they ask you for interviews first. And I had several interviews lined up, and Harper Collins Business was the first to respond to the book proposal, and the first I just happened to have an interview with. My editors, Hollis Heimbach and Kirby Sandmeyer. Incredible. Best interview of my life. Even better than my pen interview. It was so amazing. That. And And then I knew it went really well. And then the next day, they sent my agent an email asking about global rights. And I was like, oh, it must have gone really well. And then they made me an offer the next day. And it was one of those offers where accept it now and say no to everything else. And I had like 10 other interviews scheduled. And I was like, yeah, we're going to accept this. I mean, Harper Collins Business is the best nonfiction business publisher in the world. So it was like, I wasn't going to say no. And it was an incredible, I'd already knew Hollis and Kirby were going to be incredible editors for my book.
Congratulations on that. That's freaking amazing.
It's crazy. Pinch me. I can't even believe it's real. I can't even believe it really happened.
Well, and I know that you had a challenging launch. You know, now you're in the over 1 million followers across the platforms, and you had a personal hit in terms of health that, you know, that kind of like smacked you right in the face.
Literally.
And literally, as I was saying it, Anna, no pun intended, but just such another inspiring moment where you leaned into your followers on social media, and I get chills just imagining the outpour that occurred. Can you share the story?
Yeah, sure. It's a wild story. So for about a year, I had a bump on my nose, on the side of my nose by my eye that I was growing more concerned with. I had gone to a dermatologist. They said it was nothing. Went to a dermatologist, and my biopsy came back that it was cancer on a Monday evening. And they told me the best surgeon to go to was this surgeon in Philly, but she's got like this 9-month wait. And I just called, happened. And the scheduler was like, I can't believe this is happening, but she actually has an availability this Thursday morning. And I was like, okay, great. I had zero idea of what I was getting into. I've never had stitches in my life. I thought they were just going to like any dermatologist, scoop it out a little bit, maybe get one stitch, you'll be on your way. I didn't plan for anything. I didn't do any research. It was like 2 days later. My kids were off for summer vacation. I was just like planning on going to a concert that night afterwards. Like that is just the level of where I was in my head. Hadn't planned any content. And I went in for this. It's called Mohs surgery. It removes basal cell carcinoma. And quickly realized in that morning that it was going to be more significant, but I still didn't really understand how big. And it's you know, you do it there, it's outpatient, and you're awake the whole time. They numb you. And I woke up, you know, came to from the surgery with 60 stitches in my face from here all the way down my mouth. And
for context, this was a couple of years ago. This was like
this was July of 23.
Last year, July.
Not even a year ago.
You look amazing.
Oh, thank you.
I've seen the scar, and it was pretty wicked.
Yeah, totally. The experience was wicked, very traumatic. And to your point about my followers, at that point I had been, you know, posting every day and very committed to doing what I was doing. And, you know, 3 days after the surgery, when I was kind of coming to, I was like, well, I certainly can't be giving interview tips. I don't want to go into my office. I can't put on makeup. I had stitches in my face for 7 days. I was like, you know what? What would I tell someone to do? How would I coach someone? Tell your story. And in real time, I opened the camera on my phone and I said, I can't believe this happened. This big bandage on my face. I was like, because I know on social media, you can't take 2 months off and then reappear with the scar on your face and people would be like, what's happening? And I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to invite people in to heal with me. But I mean, this is what I'm doing. So like, I have to do it, you know? And it was not by design. Again, it was just kind of desperation. I was like, I can't not make content, and this is what I'm doing. So I'm, you know, and I thought to myself, no one is going to care about this. This is going to be the worst content ever, but at least I know I did it and I kept people informed. And I posted that video and I got 1 million views. And I was like, oh my God, now what have I gotten myself into? You know, I'm healing with, you know, millions of people on the internet. But here's the thing about love. This is what I believe. The love is equal, the love that you take is equal to the love that you make. I really believe this. And I believe it to be true on the internet. The internet has a bad rap and social media is terrible in a lot of ways. But here are the ways that it's absolutely incredible. Not only did it change my business and gives me access, global access to people. I mean, I teach people how to interview in Israel and Egypt and England and Australia. I mean, I have clients literally all around the world because of social media. That's incredible. But here's the thing that this is what helped me really realize the reach and the influence I had. I did a 2-week series on Heal With Me. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to get back to my regularly scheduled content. But in that time period, hundreds, thousands of people were sending me messages, emails, pictures. This is a tearjerker conversation we're having here, Raymond. Mm-hmm. People that I knew very well, people that are perfect strangers. When I was in the depth of crying on the internet with dirty hair, heal with me, I can't believe this happened to me type of stuff. People were sending me pictures of their scars, their before and afters. I am a perfect stranger on the internet, and all they wanted to do was say, hey, it happened to me and it's going to be okay. Look at how good my scar looks now. You're going to be fine. And of course, in the moment, I didn't believe any of them. I was like, oh my God, I have 60 stitches on my face. It was so crazy. And then that was the first round. And then the second round was even more miraculous. People were reaching out to me saying, I watched your posts, or I saw, one of your posts about your cancer. And my husband had a similar spot on his back, and we went to the dermatologist, and it turns out it's melanoma. You saved his life. And I just kept getting these messages and getting them and getting them and getting them. And I was like, oh my God, the internet is incredible. This global platform that brings us together. Yeah, before, I'm teaching people how to interview, how to negotiate. And now by sharing this thing and letting people into my personal journey, people are just reaching out to me all the time. Thank you for sharing that. You inspired me to get a mammogram. You inspired me to do this thing. I went and got something checked out and it's all good, but I feel better now because I did it. I'll never miss a dermatologist appointment again. I mean, it just kept going. And I still get these messages. So that to me was incredible. Really, truly. It's such a gift to be able to have this platform to do this. I get way more love back than I do negatives or trolls or any of that.
That's unbelievable. I love that. I'm just thinking to myself, I canceled my dermatologist appointment these last couple of weeks here, and I need to reschedule.
Me wagging my finger at you.
Yeah, no, you got. I'm like my mind is going into places now. Like, oh my gosh, I need to reschedule that appointment.
Reschedule that appointment. Don't miss it.
So, Anna, this book, Interviewology, you have become. I now firmly believe the queen of interviewing is so fitting, and we're coming back to that. Tell us about, so first of all, how do we find the book? How do we get access to it? And before we do that, I want to go back to this, just a teachable moment for our listeners who have an idea and they are kind of grappling with this idea of starting anew, to clock out of whatever situation. It could be a great job that they're in, but they have this burning desire in their belly that, they want to do something different, or they want to pursue, a feeling that is like this intuition that you described earlier. So what's the secret behind that? And then we'll hop into how people can get in touch with you.
Okay, so I live by this motto. I think his name is Lao Tzu, who said this. If you don't change direction, you will end up where you're going. That is my life motto. So I always ask myself, do I want to end up where this direction is taking me? And if the answer is an unequivocal hell no, then I change. And I don't question it. And I follow that intuition and that feeling. And I don't care what society tells me. Yes, if I had listened to society all those years ago, I would have stayed in that corporate. I would still be working there. I would be collecting a very comfortable biweekly paycheck, and I would have tons of seniority, and I'd be on the executive team. And, I could be there for 30 years. None of that appealed to me. Even though, I of course, I like the challenges of being an entrepreneur were crazy. It's sort of like becoming a parent. Like nobody's like, oh, I want to have a newborn and be up all night. No, but like you learn so much from it and you become stronger and braver and wiser as the result. So for me, and how I coach people is I always ask them, do you want to end up where you're headed in this direction? And if the answer is no, then you have to change your course. If you don't change direction, you're going to end up where you're going. And that to me is what helps me figure out and make decisions about big moments in my life. If you continue here, you'll just be here doing this, which is fine. And that could be great. And if you love that, then that's your answer. But if not, life's too short. Life is too short to not follow a dream. And I think that that's what we're here for. Our biggest expression. Why does life matter, right? Like, I'm really good at a few things and I'm terrible at most other things. So like, why wouldn't I lean into this thing that I'm really good at? And I want to be like the fullest expression of that. I want to help as many people. I want to get as many people great jobs. I want as many people to like have amazing job offers because I gave them tips and tools. I want people to feel authentic. I want people to feel like they know themselves better because of the work that I do. And that's literally all I can do. I can't cook. I can't there's so many things I can't do. So I'm like, I'm just going to lean into this thing. And I encourage people to do the same thing. You don't have to be a master of everything. Jack of all trades, none.
I love that. Well, Anna, you've been amazing. So there's everything that, in terms of how people get in touch with you will be in the show notes. But so how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah. So come to theinterviewology.com, my website. My book is available, Interviewology, The New Science of Interviewing, wherever books are sold. Follow me on social media, wherever you get your social media. I post the same video on LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram, and YouTube. So whatever you're on, whatever your preferred platform, I'm on there. And yeah, if you're interested in discovering your interview style to figure out what your interview style is, you can get an Interviewology profile. And then of course, read my book to learn about all 4 interview styles.
Awesome. So with that, the queen of interviewing, Anna Papalia, you're amazing. I love you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Raymond.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thanks everyone for listening. And with that, until next time. Hello, Raymond again here. Thank you again to our sponsor, Career Minds, a global provider of outplacement and leadership development services. You can learn more about Career Minds at careerminds.com. If you'd like to connect with me about your own personal career journey, you can connect with me on LinkedIn as well as Instagram at raymondlee.co. Until next time, remember, if you're stuck or unsure of your career or future and think it's time for a change, ask yourself these 3 questions. Does my work or career make me feel alive? Am I doing the things that matter to me most? And am I creating value for myself and others? Until next time, everyone.